People reaching age 60 with no retirement savings are facing a structural income problem rather than a missed opportunity to build wealth, because the economic environment no longer rewards late accumulation in the way it once did. Inflation has reduced the real value of wages and savings over time, meaning that dollars earned today buy less than they did even 10 years ago. At the same time, essential expenses such as housing, healthcare, insurance, utilities, and food rise faster than official inflation measures, placing pressure on fixed or limited incomes. For someone without savings, retirement is not about growing assets but about replacing earned income with dependable cash flow that can cover basic living costs consistently. Interest rates complicate this situation further. While higher rates can benefit savers with large balances, they do little for individuals who have no capital to deploy. Borrowing costs remain high, making it difficult to use credit as a bridge during emergencies or income gaps. Older adults who rely on credit cards, personal loans, or refinancing to manage expenses face rising interest obligations that consume future income. This reduces flexibility and increases vulnerability to small financial shocks such as medical bills or home repairs. Without savings, even minor disruptions can become long-term problems. Purchasing power erosion is the central issue. Social Security benefits are adjusted annually, but these adjustments lag behind real-world cost increases, especially for healthcare and housing. For someone entering retirement with no savings, Social Security often becomes the primary or only income source. If expenses rise faster than benefits, the gap must be filled through continued work, assistance programs, or debt. This creates a cycle where income insecurity replaces the traditional idea of retirement. The issue is not how much money can be made, but how reliably expenses can be paid month after month. Government debt and currency pressure add another layer of risk. High federal debt limits policy flexibility and increases the likelihood of future tax changes, benefit adjustments, or reduced purchasing power of the dollar. While these factors unfold slowly, their cumulative effect is felt most by individuals with no financial buffer. Those with assets can adjust portfolios or draw from reserves, while those without savings absorb the full impact through higher costs and reduced standards of living. Retirement and post-retirement risks increase sharply when there is no savings cushion. Health declines, reduced work capacity, and caregiving responsibilities become more likely with age. These risks are predictable, not exceptional. Without savings, there is no margin for error. The focus shifts from optimizing returns to preventing financial collapse. Stability becomes more valuable than growth, and predictability outweighs potential upside. At this stage of life, the central challenge is designing a system that produces steady income, limits exposure to large losses, and aligns expenses with guaranteed resources. Wealth accumulation is no longer the primary objective. Survival, continuity, and control take precedence. Recognizing this shift is essential, because applying accumulation-focused thinking to an income-focused problem leads to poor decisions, unnecessary risk, and long-term insecurity. Inflation, interest rates, government debt, and currency devaluation interact in ways that steadily increase retirement risk, especially for individuals with limited or no savings. Inflation raises the cost of everyday necessities over time, reducing the real value of fixed incomes. Even moderate inflation compounds significantly across a retirement period that may last 20 or 30 years. A dollar that buys a full basket of goods today will buy meaningfully less a decade from now, forcing retirees to spend more just to maintain the same standard of living. This effect is gradual but unavoidable and becomes more damaging when there is no accumulated capital to offset rising costs. Interest rates affect retirees differently depending on their financial position. Higher rates can increase yields on savings accounts or bonds, but these benefits require existing assets. For those without savings, higher rates mostly appear as increased borrowing costs. Credit cards, auto loans, and home equity lines of credit become more expensive, raising monthly obligations. This shifts income away from necessities and into interest payments, leaving less room to absorb inflation. At the same time, lower rates in prior years encouraged reliance on debt, which now becomes harder to manage as rates normalize or rise. Government debt influences retirement outcomes through taxation, benefit sustainability, and monetary policy. As federal debt grows, the government must either increase revenue, reduce spending, or allow inflation to erode the real value of obligations. Retirees are exposed to all three outcomes. Higher taxes reduce net income. Benefit changes can limit the growth of Social Security or Medicare coverage. Inflation reduces purchasing power without reducing nominal benefit payments. None of these effects are sudden, but together they gradually weaken financial security for those who depend heavily on public programs. Currency devaluation is closely tied to debt and monetary policy. When the value of the dollar declines, imported goods and energy become more expensive. This directly affects food, fuel, medical supplies, and consumer goods. Retirees feel these increases more acutely because a larger share of their income is spent on necessities. Unlike working households, retirees have limited ability to offset higher costs by earning more. The result is a steady squeeze on disposable income, even when benefits appear stable on paper. These forces amplify traditional retirement risks. Longevity risk increases as people live longer without corresponding increases in guaranteed income. Health-related expenses tend to rise faster than general inflation, consuming a growing share of income over time. Market volatility creates additional uncertainty for those attempting to invest late in life, where losses cannot be easily recovered through future earnings. For individuals without savings, these risks are not abstract concerns but practical constraints that shape daily financial decisions. The combined effect of inflation, interest rates, debt, and currency pressure is a narrowing margin for error. Each factor alone might be manageable, but together, they reduce flexibility and increase dependency on fixed income sources. Understanding this interaction is critical because it explains why late-stage retirement planning must prioritize stability, cost control, and predictable income rather than growth, leverage, or financial complexity. Common retirement advice often fails older adults with no savings because it is built on assumptions that no longer apply at this stage of life. Much of the guidance assumes decades of remaining work, consistent market growth, and the ability to tolerate short-term losses in exchange for long-term gains. For someone entering their 60s with limited time, declining earning capacity, and higher exposure to health risks, these assumptions break down. Strategies designed for accumulation do not translate well to situations where income replacement and stability are the primary needs. One frequent recommendation is to invest aggressively to catch up. This approach increases exposure to market volatility at a point when recovery from losses is unlikely. A major market decline can permanently reduce income potential if withdrawals are required during downturns. Sequence of returns risk becomes critical because early losses have a disproportionate impact on long-term outcomes. Without savings, there is no buffer to wait for markets to recover, making aggressive investing more dangerous than helpful. Another common suggestion is to work longer to make up for lost savings. While continued employment can provide income and delay benefit claims, it is not a reliable solution for everyone. Health limitations, caregiving responsibilities, age discrimination, and physically demanding jobs reduce the feasibility of extended work. Even when work is available, earnings may be inconsistent or insufficient to meaningfully change long-term security. Planning that depends on uninterrupted employment ignores the realities many older adults face. Advice that emphasizes cutting discretionary spending also falls short. Individuals with no retirement savings typically already operate on tight budgets. Most expenses are fixed or essential, such as housing, food, utilities, insurance, and healthcare. Further reductions often lead to quality of life issues without materially improving financial outcomes. Focusing solely on spending cuts can distract from more impactful decisions related to income sources, benefits optimization, and risk management. Some guidance assumes access to sophisticated financial products or professional management. These options often involve fees, complexity, or minimum balances that are impractical for those with limited resources. Complexity itself becomes a risk, increasing the chance of errors, misunderstandings, or unsuitable recommendations. Simpler structures tend to be more effective when resources are constrained and decisions must be easy to manage over time. There is also a tendency to overstate the reliability of average market returns or historical norms. While long-term averages may look favorable, individual outcomes depend on timing, withdrawals, and personal circumstances. Relying on optimistic projections can lead to underestimating risk and overestimating future income. For someone without savings, there is little margin for miscalculation. The failure of common advice stems from treating late-stage retirement planning as a scaled-down version of early-stage investing. The goals, constraints, and risks are fundamentally different. At this point, protecting income, avoiding large losses, and maintaining access to essential services matter more than maximizing returns. Effective planning recognizes these limits and replaces broad, generalized advice with approaches grounded in realism, simplicity, and control. Common retirement advice often fails older adults with no savings because it is built on assumptions that no longer apply at this stage of life. Much of the guidance assumes decades of remaining work, consistent market growth, and the ability to tolerate short-term losses in exchange for long-term gains. For someone entering their 60s with limited time, declining earning capacity, and higher exposure to health risks, these assumptions break down. Strategies designed for accumulation do not translate well to situations where income replacement and stability are the primary needs. One frequent recommendation is to invest aggressively to catch up. This approach increases exposure to market volatility at a point when recovery from losses is unlikely. A major market decline can permanently reduce income potential if withdrawals are required during downturns. Sequence of returns risk becomes critical because early losses have a disproportionate impact on long-term outcomes. Without savings, there is no buffer to wait for markets to recover, making aggressive investing more dangerous than helpful. Another common suggestion is to work longer to make up for lost savings. While continued employment can provide income and delay benefit claims, it is not a reliable solution for everyone. Health limitations, caregiving responsibilities, age discrimination, and physically demanding jobs reduce the feasibility of extended work. Even when work is available, earnings may be inconsistent or insufficient to meaningfully change long-term security. Planning that depends on uninterrupted employment ignores the realities many older adults face. Advice that emphasizes cutting discretionary spending also falls short. Individuals with no retirement savings typically already operate on tight budgets. Most expenses are fixed or essential, such as housing, food, utilities, insurance, and healthcare. Further reductions often lead to quality of life issues without materially improving financial outcomes. Focusing solely on spending cuts can distract from more impactful decisions related to income sources, benefits optimization, and risk management. Some guidance assumes access to sophisticated financial products or professional management. These options often involve fees, complexity, or minimum balances that are impractical for those with limited resources. Complexity itself becomes a risk, increasing the chance of errors, misunderstandings, or unsuitable recommendations. Simpler structures tend to be more effective when resources are constrained and decisions must be easy to manage over time. There is also a tendency to overstate the reliability of average market returns or historical norms. While long-term averages may look favorable, individual outcomes depend on timing, withdrawals, and personal circumstances. Relying on optimistic projections can lead to underestimating risk and overestimating future income. For someone without savings, there is little margin for miscalculation. The failure of common advice stems from treating late-stage retirement planning as a scaled-down version of early-stage investing. The goals, constraints, and risks are fundamentally different. At this point, protecting income, avoiding large losses, and maintaining access to essential services matter more than maximizing returns. Effective planning recognizes these limits and replaces broad, generalized advice with approaches grounded in realism, simplicity, and control. A workable retirement approach for someone in their 60s with no savings must shift focus away from growth and toward income reliability, cost control, and risk reduction. At this stage, the objective is not to build wealth, but to create a stable financial structure that can function under uncertain economic conditions. The starting point is identifying dependable income sources and understanding how they interact with essential expenses. Social Security typically forms the foundation, and decisions around when and how to claim benefits have long-term consequences for monthly cash flow. Delaying benefits when possible increases lifetime payments, while early claiming reduces them permanently. The decision must be evaluated against health, employment prospects, and immediate income needs rather than general rules. Expense management becomes a parallel priority. Fixed costs such as housing, utilities, insurance, and healthcare must be aligned with predictable income. Reducing or restructuring high-interest debt lowers ongoing obligations and increases flexibility. Eliminating unnecessary financial commitments reduces the risk of forced borrowing during emergencies. The goal is not extreme frugality but predictability. Stable expenses allow limited income to stretch further and reduce exposure to inflation shocks. Guaranteed or stable income sources provide a critical layer of protection. Pensions, annuities, and government benefits are designed to deliver regular payments regardless of market conditions. While not suitable for everyone, these tools address the primary risk faced by retirees without savings, which is income interruption. Predictable payments simplify budgeting and reduce reliance on credit. Stability is more valuable than upside potential when resources are limited. Risk avoidance is central to this approach. Large financial losses are far more damaging than missed gains. Avoiding speculative investments, high-fee products, and complex strategies reduces the chance of irreversible mistakes. Liquidity matters more than return, because access to cash during emergencies prevents debt accumulation. Even small reserves can provide meaningful protection if they are accessible and preserved. Healthcare and insurance planning also play a major role. Medical expenses are a leading cause of financial stress in retirement. Understanding Medicare options, supplemental coverage, and out-of-pocket exposure helps prevent unexpected costs from destabilizing the entire budget. Insurance decisions should focus on catastrophic protection rather than comprehensive coverage that strains monthly income. Work, when possible, becomes a supporting tool rather than a primary solution. Part-time or flexible employment can supplement income, delay benefit claims, and provide margin without relying on full-time work. The emphasis is on sustainability and adaptability, recognizing that work capacity may change over time. A workable system integrates these elements into a simple structure that can be maintained without constant adjustment. Clear income sources, controlled expenses, minimal debt, and limited risk exposure create a foundation that prioritizes continuity over optimization. This approach does not promise comfort or abundance, but it reduces uncertainty and improves the likelihood that essential needs can be met consistently over time. Long-term survival in retirement without savings depends on a system that emphasizes cash flow stability, controlled risk, and regular reassessment rather than asset growth or financial complexity. The purpose of such a system is to ensure that essential expenses can be met consistently under a wide range of economic conditions. This begins with a clear understanding of guaranteed income sources and their reliability over time. Social Security, pensions, and any contractual income streams form the core. These sources should be mapped against fixed monthly expenses to identify gaps and vulnerabilities. Cash flow management is central to this framework. Income must arrive predictably and be sufficient to cover housing, food, utilities, insurance, and healthcare. Irregular or uncertain income increases reliance on credit and exposes retirees to interest rate risk. When possible, income streams should be timed and structured to match expense patterns. Even small adjustments can reduce stress and improve stability when margins are tight. Risk management focuses on preventing large losses rather than pursuing gains. This includes avoiding leverage, minimizing exposure to market volatility, and maintaining access to liquid funds. Liquidity acts as a buffer against unexpected expenses, such as medical costs or home repairs. Without savings, even modest reserves can prevent a temporary problem from becoming a permanent financial setback. Preservation of capital, however limited, takes priority over return. Periodic reassessment is a critical component of long-term sustainability. Economic conditions, benefit rules, healthcare needs, and personal capacity change over time. A system that is not reviewed becomes outdated and ineffective. Regular check-ins allow adjustments to income timing, expense levels, and risk exposure before problems escalate. These reviews do not require complex analysis, only consistent attention to core variables. Simplicity increases durability. Complex financial products, frequent trading, or intricate withdrawal strategies increase the likelihood of errors and dependence on external advice. A simple system is easier to understand, manage, and maintain under stress. This is especially important as cognitive and health factors become more relevant with age. Reducing decision load improves consistency and reduces mistakes. Expense alignment remains ongoing. Inflation and healthcare costs tend to rise faster than general income adjustments. Monitoring expense categories helps identify areas where costs can be contained without compromising essential needs. The objective is not continual reduction but balance. Stability improves when expenses grow more slowly than income, even if both are modest. This system does not aim to recreate pre-retirement living standards or achieve financial independence. It is designed to maximize reliability and reduce vulnerability. By focusing on predictable income, controlled risk, liquidity, and regular review, older adults without savings can improve financial continuity and reduce exposure to shocks. Survival in this context is defined by the ability to meet essential needs consistently, adapt to change, and maintain financial control over time. People's money is losing value in real terms. Inflation has raised the cost of food, housing, insurance, utilities, and healthcare faster than many wages and fixed incomes. Interest rates have risen, but they have not fully offset inflation for savers. Purchasing power is weaker than it was a decade ago. Government debt is historically high, which places long-term pressure on taxes, benefits, and the currency. The dollar continues to lose value over time, even in periods when inflation appears to slow. Retirement and post-retirement risks are concentrated around longevity, healthcare costs, income gaps, and market volatility. At age 60 with no retirement savings, the central problem is not catching up to an ideal retirement target. The problem is income reliability and risk control over the next 25 to 35 years. Most people in this position will depend on a mix of continued work, Social Security, and careful expense management. There is little margin for large investment losses, long recovery periods, or speculative strategies. Time is limited and mistakes are harder to undo. Common advice often fails because it assumes conditions that do not exist. Telling a 60-year-old to invest aggressively ignores sequence of returns risk, where early losses permanently reduce lifetime income. Advice to just work longer overlooks health limitations and job market realities. Suggestions to cut expenses often ignore fixed costs such as housing, medical care, and insurance. Many plans rely on optimistic market returns or assume Social Security alone will be sufficient, even though average benefits replace only a portion of pre-retirement income. These approaches focus on growth or hope rather than durability. What actually works is a system built around stability, cash flow, and risk reduction. The goal is not to build wealth quickly, but to reduce the chance of financial failure. This requires controlling expenses, maximizing guaranteed income sources, avoiding large losses, and keeping flexibility. Historically, retirees who prioritize income security and low volatility are more likely to maintain independence than those who chase higher returns late in life. The framework begins with income first, assets second. Guaranteed or semi-guaranteed income sources reduce reliance on markets. Liquidity matters more than long-term growth because unexpected costs become more frequent with age. Debt reduction improves cash flow more reliably than investment gains. Simplicity reduces errors, fees, and behavioral mistakes. These principles have held across decades of inflation cycles, recessions, and policy changes. The following checklist outlines practical recommendations that work together as a system, not as isolated tactics. Delay Social Security when possible because benefits increase with each year of delay up to age 70, providing higher lifetime income and inflation adjustments. Continue working in some capacity if health allows. Prioritizing stable income over higher pay or advancement. Reduce fixed expenses, especially housing, insurance premiums, and recurring debt obligations. Eliminate high-interest debt. Since guaranteed interest savings often exceed realistic investment returns, build a small emergency reserve, even if modest, to avoid reliance on credit during disruptions. Prioritize health coverage and preventive care, as medical costs are a leading cause of financial instability. Avoid speculative investments, leverage, or concentrated positions that can cause permanent losses. Use simple, low-cost financial products that are easy to monitor and understand. Focus any savings on capital preservation rather than maximum growth. Plan withdrawals conservatively, assuming lower returns and longer life expectancy. Understand Social Security taxation and Medicare rules to avoid avoidable penalties or higher premiums. Reassess the plan annually to adjust for health, income changes, and policy updates. This information is provided for general educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, or legal advice. Individual circumstances vary and decisions should be made based on personal financial conditions and current laws.